Hello and welcome back to the Dicebreaker podcast. It sounds like we just took a commercial break, but in fact it's been a week since you last heard our dulcet tones. This is episode 12. I am Matt Jarvis, I'm the editor-in-chief of Dicebreaker, and today I'm joined by two of the team. I'm joined by Johnny Chiodini, head of video for Dicebreaker. How are you, Johnny?
I'm alright, I'm not too bad. I had last week off, so I'm feeling surprisingly well rested, which is a pleasing thing.
Excellent, I'm glad to hear. And we are also joined by Alex Meehan, staff writer for Dicebreaker. How are you doing, Meehan?
I'm full of noodles at the moment, so I'm a little bit bloated.
Oh, okay, it's not a kind of saying, it's a literal... You're literally full of noodles.
Yeah, I've never heard that saying before.
No, people say like full of beans. It could be, I don't know, a Meehan family idiom.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past your family at all. Like, how are you feeling this morning? Well, yesterday I was full of marrow rum, but today I'm just absolutely packed to the gills with noodles.
No one ever wants to be full of marrow rum, believe you me. And if you are, go straight to your nearest doctor.
Every time you say marrow rum, for some reason I think of like the Kessel Run from Star Wars. It's just like a really terrible version of the Kessel Run.
She made the marrow run in less than 12 shots.
Oh, God.
Yeah, well... There's probably more than 12 shots of rum in some marrow rum.
In your average marrow, yeah.
In your average marrow, yeah.
But we're not here to talk about marrows, well. We're not here to talk mostly about marrows. We're here to talk about board games and tabletop RPGs.
Is this your subtle plan to transform this podcast into a solely marrow-based entertainment?
I've been watching a lot of Spring Watch, so yeah, it's happening.
I can turn any vegetable into an alcoholic beverage if you try hard enough.
Okay, as much as I dislike the marrow rum, and I really do, I would love a series where someone just does that, like tries to transform every single kind of vegetable into an alcohol. See what
you
it's
must
like.
try the absinthe yam. It truly is delicious. Anyway, moving on to board games. Let's start with you, Meehan. What have you been playing this week?
Oh, what have I been playing? Well, I've been playing with the old tabletop simulator with my friends. And we played Sushi Go Party, which is a favourite amongst us. And I lost both times, which is fairly standard. We had a little bit of trouble with the mod. Because I was a fool and didn't realise I had to be a certain colour in order to operate all the stuff. So we basically launched it and we were like, where are all the cards? And then we spent about 5 minutes trying to work out what to do. And then I was like, oh, hang on. Let me suddenly change the right colour. And then I could see everything. You can just press the buttons to get it to like deal the cards you want. It's actually quite nifty. It's like, oh, select some tiles, and it randomly selects them for you, and then deal like the cards. And although you have to, like in the game, add desserts every single round, and I forgot to do that on the last round, which meant that those free green tea ice creams I'd collected were basically useless.
Oh, mate.
Because I couldn't score points because you needed 4 and there weren't any left in the final round. So, boo boo, I'm a fool. But that's a great game. I really love Sushi Go Party and Sushi Go. They're really good games to introduce to people who don't play games that much. Because they're really simple and they've got a really nice visual kind of look to them. Like you're passing around the cards, usually physically, although in this case we were fumbling around with the digital cards in the game. And
chucking them into the void.
Yeah, at one
sink
point,
out of view.
My friend was like, guys, I don't know where my cards have gone. And I was like, okay. So we had to restart the game. Because we just lost a load of cards.
Oh, that's frustrating.
That was fun, for the most part. And then we also played... you're not going to be very happy with me, Johnny. I attempted to teach the crew to my friends. But I just forgot like how to play it, and I was looking through the rule book, and it was like 9:30 in the evening, and I was just like, oh, I'm so tired. And then I was like, guys, can we play something I really actually know how to play?
Okay. I'm not seeing where I should be disappointed with you. Like,
it's more the fact that you love that game and you've taught us how to play it,
I do,
and then
and I miss
it's
it,
all
but
like it's gone in one ear and just fallen out.
what did you play instead?
You're gonna dislike this even more. We played The Mind.
Oh
Instead.
no, I am disappointed in you. You're right. Yeah.
I didn't want to, but my friends were like, "Oh, it's close enough." And I was like, how are we going to play?
Who are these friends, and when are they free for a fight?
I don't think they'd stand much of a chance, to be honest.
No, I agree.
Challenge them to a duel over scythe.
Yeah, you are virtually slapping the glove. It's not a great game to play over Tabletop Simulator, funnily enough, because you can't really gauge people's physical... reactions to what's going on.
Yeah, it's all about atmosphere, isn't it?
Yeah, The Mind. It's like a game where you have to play numbered cards in succession, like numeral succession, and you don't know what everyone's got. So you have to kind of chance it and like feel out the atmosphere. But obviously, because we couldn't see each other, we were using weird metaphors to try and describe how close we think we were to each card. One of these was, how close are the hobbits to Isengard?
See, it's kind of like interesting because I think in the mind, you're not allowed to talk, right? It's all about like being around each other and kind of reading body language, or at least that's what it says in the book. It's like, oh, you're developing a psychic connection.
Sounds like new age rubbish to me.
When you can't see each other either, and you're just completely removed in silence and without anyone around you, I guess it's kind of odd.
Yeah, no, hence the metaphors. Hence the, okay, how close are you to Isengard? Oh, I'm in the forests outside. or like, I can see Saruman, like, waving his hair up there. You get me? We were trying to use a sort of different language to describe how close we were. That was fun.
Innovative.
And my flatmate and I picked up Pandemic Legacy Season 1 again.
Oh, hello.
Because we'd fallen off the bandwagon for a bit because life happens. And we were like, no, I had some time off as well. So we used some of that time off to do another month, which is like another game. And our winning streak continues. We have only lost a single game of Pandemic Legacy, and we are now on to June. So we're halfway through the game.
That's actually really impressive.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened. We're both very paranoid that we've been playing the game wrong. Like,
that's
huge. Yeah, I feel like in both those games, April was where we got absolutely just beaten to a pulp by the game, essentially. I just remember losing within a matter of turns and then being like, okay, let's repeat this.
The thing is, we're getting the idea that we're not like cheating or like unconsciously cheating, because every time we win, we only just win. So like this time, there were multiple ways that we could have lost in that turn that we won. So, like, if I hadn't been able to perform the actions I needed to on my turn, we would have just outright lost. But there were, like, multiple ways we could have lost. Like, we were about to run out of cards. We had multiple outbreaks happen. It wasn't like we were sailing through. And the first game we lost, I think, was the first one, was, like, January. But then straight, like, after that, every single month after that, we've been winning. And to the point where we don't have any, like, bonus cards anymore to help us.
Wow.
And we even made it harder for ourselves by forgetting some of the upgrades we had on the board. And yet we still won somehow. Like, it's a little bit like, I'm a little bit paranoid that we've been playing it wrong. But
well, when you're good, you're good.
maybe
and I think if you're only just winning, That sounds like it's probably because I think if you were cheating by mistake, you would just wipe through it easily. So,
Yeah.
You know,
No.
don't discredit your own skill at it.
yeah.
I know, look, we just have so many people tell us, it's so hard, I can't believe you're winning this much.
I don't know. Like when I didn't finish season 1, but we lost once or twice, but it didn't. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. If I were where you are now, I would be surprised by my streak, but I don't think it's like nails. I don't know. But then the first couple of years after I started playing Pandemic, when I was still playing it relatively regularly, that entire time, we didn't realise that you win when you cure all 4 diseases. We thought you had to eradicate all 4.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we'd never won. Like, and there was one time we were like 1 cube away from a total victory. So we were actually playing on like an obscenely long
hard
mode. So maybe now just normal Pandemic feels a lot more forgiving. Strange.
Yeah, I mean, eradicating a disease is actually like really useful, especially if you can do that early in the game, because then, you know, you've got more of a chance of cards being drawn during the infection stage
exactly,
that do
yeah.
absolutely nothing. And when that happens, it's like such a feeling of relief. And like there were times during the infection phase that we were like, oh my goodness, we cannot have this card be drawn, we cannot, and it comes up. And we were like, oh, because then at one point there was a chain reaction of 3 outbreaks happen at once.
Oof.
And we were like, that was near the beginning of the game. And we were like, this is not a good sign for what's going to happen. But somehow we managed to claw it back. But, you know, the thing that continues to impress me about the game is the fact that you're basically doing the same thing every time, roughly, but it never feels boring and it always feels like a different experience. And I think it's because each month changes the mechanics just enough that it feels fresh, like a fresh... It helps that there are quite a few random elements that, again, you know, add to the fresh feeling, and it's always that tense. There are like multiple moments of tension where we're like, if this happens, if we draw this card, then we lose. And like my friend spent about a minute shuffling the cards, and I was like, are you gonna put them down? And they were like, I don't want to do it, because they're convinced they're cursed, because they've had a history of drawing exactly the one card we do not want to be drawn because it will cause an outbreak. But no, I'm glad we've, you know, started playing it again, and I do want us to finish it because you're a great advocate for Season 2, are you not, Mr. Jarvis?
I am. I take the position that Season 2 is better than Season 1. I really love Season 1, but
Hot
Season
take.
2, I think... And it might be because I just played so much Pandemic, but Season 2 kind of flips it all on its head from the off, and it kind of moves away from... It still feels like Pandemic, but there's enough of a change where it instantly kind of hits you that this isn't just Pandemic. So yeah, I really like Season 2, and I'm kind of fascinated to see what they do in Season 3, which will be out sometime. I can, you know...
Yeah, I mean,
let's say
it's
not anytime soon,
Yeah.
I would imagine.
It's not the right time. I mean,
yeah.
even right now I feel guilty about talking about Season 1, but at the same time, if you separate it from the theme, it's still a really great game.
Yeah.
And like they definitely will find a better time to release Season 3, and you know that it's a big game. It makes sense beyond just the connections with the theme that they would wait to release it because they want people to be able to access it easily. You know, yeah, it's a big game just because of the legacy of Pandemic legacy. So yeah, that's what I've been playing.
All right, excellent. Johnny, what have you been playing?
It's kind of a lot of the same stuff I always talk about when I come on the podcast. Obviously, I've been playing a lot of Deadlands because I play a lot of Deadlands. I had a really lovely moment in the last session we ran where the posse got like a break from all the normal shenanigans, and they were travelling first class on a train. Everyone got dressed up for dinner. Everyone had drinks and like did some amazing character stuff, and everyone relaxed. And then I described the train coming to an unscheduled halt, and everyone put their heads in their hands because they knew that it was over and the next horrible thing had arrived. And I felt so guilty. I wanted to take it back because like I always feel like when I'm GMing, like the dream is when I've got 20 minutes or more where I don't have to talk because everyone's just propelling the action themselves, and it was beautiful. Everyone was having such a nice time, and then I was like, but you know life's hard, right? Everyone was like, oh no. So
It's too real, Johnny.
I know, I'm sorry, man. That was pretty powerful. Off the back of that, I haven't been playing Doomtown Reloaded, but I have been going through my cards because there's a couple of expansions I've not even played with that I own. So I'm trying to just slowly catch myself up on the meta while sort of daydreaming about spooky cowboys. So that when we, when the restrictions on quarantine lift and I can slap leather with people in person, I'm going to be like top of my game with some fun new decks. And apart from that, I'm playing a bit of Gloomhaven as part of our continuing series on the channel. This week's episode is already up, and we got stomped. It was the first time we'd really struggled because we were sort of doing the introductory missions, and then there was one particular scenario, and from the looks of things, I was like, this might be above our pay grade. I don't know, but we decided to do it anyway, and that was a huge mistake. We got absolutely battered, but it was, in a weird way, quite rewarding, because it showed me for the first time what it's like to play Gloomhaven with your back properly against the wall. And also, we're becoming quite a tight-knit unit now, like me, Wheels, and Lowlies. Like, our playthrough is really satisfying. But yeah, it was also just nice to see what that game's like when it stops handling you with kid gloves and decides to break your face. Because it did so admirably. It really did.
Gloomhaven, so I haven't played the digital version for clarity, but I remember the board game version just being at points just unbelievably tough.
Yeah.
Because when we first started playing it, we played, I don't know, however many scenarios, and we realised we were actually not exhausting our deck. So I think you take cards out, right? It's been a little while.
Yeah.
But your deck kind of gradually goes down as you use some of your more powerful moves, and then you can eventually just end up exhausted and kind of running out of cards. Mm-hmm. But we weren't doing that. So the first few scenarios were like, oh, okay, this is, we'd heard some tough things, but this is fine.
Yeah.
And then when we realised that rule and started playing properly with the full rules, it was like, oh, right, this is what everyone was on about. It is really hard.
Yeah. At the minute, I'm having a sort of, like, it feels like the honeymoon period for me in Gloomhaven is now over. Whereas before I was like, oh, what a lovely, exciting game. Now, when you draw a card to determine whether you do bonus damage or less damage or no damage or double damage or whatever, that's grating on me a little bit. Because I think what it does is the moments of triumph are nice when you're like, hooray, I've done big damage, but I also feel like a lot of the time that stuff comes out when we've already calculated how much damage we want to do because we're really planning carefully. So when it then just says like, oh, times 0, actually you do nothing, it makes me feel stupid for daring to hope, and that's a strange feeling. Like, I don't like it when games make me feel dumb for trying. So at the minute, like, I'm not a big fan of that mechanic. Ask me in a week and I'll probably be back in love with it, but it's a bit strange. So that's, I've been playing some Gloomhaven. Oh, and I'm no longer playing Diplomacy.
Oh.
The game I began on, I believe it was the 23rd of April, finally ended last week, and I won. Well, it was a joint win. I was Italy the whole time,
Congrats.
and Austria and I teamed up, and we decided to go for a dual victory, and we did it, and it was nice. It was just fun to not betray anyone for an entire game. It was terrifying. I kept thinking he was coming after me, but we did it. So it was good. But it felt mean bringing the game to an end. Because we were like, we basically put out a press release being like, you've already lost. Surrender now. And they did. So it was like, oh, whoops.
So this is on Backstabber.
This is, yes.
People wondering.
Yeah.
Which, sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's like a free client, so it's got its own inbox functionality, and you can play anonymously, which we did, which was the most fun I think I've ever had with Diplomacy. And yeah, it's just a really nifty system. It's good.
Yeah, I love the idea of the press. So for people who haven't seen Backstabber, you have like a section called press, which is essentially the messages. Mm-hmm. So when you're referring to a press release, it's almost quite literally that, where you just pick kind of the recipients and send it to everyone.
Yeah.
Which is very funny because in actual diplomacy, you're all in the same room, and so it's just like a lot of mean looks at each other and kind of filthy glances.
I'm never playing diplomacy in person again. Like I wrote about this for the site actually, about how playing online changed it from a game I really don't like to one I cherish. It's just great. Playing things by post is wonderful. Like I know Wheels last week, he was already talking about single player RPGs, wasn't he? I've played The Machine, which I assume he was talking about, and I've posted that on, and I can't wait to find out where that's going and who's got it and read it again. I want to buy lots and lots of stamps and send my friends fun letters. That's where I am with lockdown right now. But yeah.
You say fun letters, but The Machine is like a really kind of dark,
horrible,
twisted...
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're cursed now. Here's this book that you need to write in and succumb to your eventual doom. Have fun.
Yeah, maybe my idea of fun doesn't normally align with that of others. But hey, I was like, an early noughties emo kid. It's not me, man.
Play The Machine over vampirefreaks.com.
What is that?
Oh, just me. I'm not going to go into it. It was kind of like
your
MySpace for edgy kids. Oh no, it was like an actual thing. It was kind of like a MySpace for the emo scene. Mm-hmm. That. If you imagine mid 80s The Cure as MySpace, that's kind of the vibe it was going for.
The thing is, you say and I'm like, I don't know, because when I was a younger person, I never had an emo stage. Like it's strange. It's like all I knew a lot of people who did have an emo stage. In fact, most people my age did. Let's clarify, most people who were weirdos when they were younger, like I was, did. But for some reason, I just seem to never... I never listened to, My Chemical Romance. I never listened to, any of the kind of really big emo music of the time. I never backcombed my hair, none of that stuff. I was just sat there listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers at the age of, 14. Yeah. I guess that's why I'm a Victorian person. Because I just don't...
Red Hot Chili Peppers Victorian era.
Yeah.
No, more like trends just don't happen.
Yeah.
I did go through the early noughties, indie music trend. And that's now just something that is just sort of a permanent part of me, but I have a greater awareness of it. But, I wouldn't say that was a huge trend. I guess that it was more like a music trend. It wasn't like a culture trend like emo was. So maybe I'm just so out of touch with what's going on. Maybe that's the origins of that.
I loved that one song they did, California Consumption. It was really good. So what have you been playing, Matt?
I have been playing nothing to do with the Red Hot Chili Peppers or the Victorian era. Actually, that's not true. But we'll get on to that. I have been playing, speaking of very tough games, I played Flashpoint Fire Rescue. I played the digital version because it was included in the kind of incredible itch bundle of...
Is it in
ended
there?
up as 1,700 games.
Is
something
it in
like that.
the big one?
I didn't know it was in there.
So
oh,
this
goodness,
is the
I have to find it.
bundle for racial diversity and equality, I think it's called. So if you're listening to this, it's now ended. It raised over $8 million, which, good on Itch and everyone that contributed to that bundle and everyone that backed that bundle. So that's going towards the Black Lives Matter movement and related charities and groups. But yeah, it was this incredible bundle for people who don't know of. There were indie video games in there were tabletop RPGs, there's visual novels and interactive fiction, and there's a series of essays about Metal Gear Solid for some reason that's just among everything else.
Oh my goodness! I bet you just saw those and you were like, right, I know what I'm doing with my Sunday afternoon now.
I haven't read them yet, but I did. Yeah, so I stumbled across Flashpoint Fire Rescue, which is it's a co-op game about you're firefighters and you are trying to rescue people inside a burning home. So the beginner game, there are two modes. So there's the beginner game where you are just general firefighters and you walk in, you can extinguish fires, you can carry people out to safety and chop down walls, and so on. So you have, and then the fire spreads randomly at the end of each turn. But the advanced variant, which is kind of the full game, you then get firefighters with different specialties. So there's one that specializes in, I think they call it a hazmat specialist. So there's an explosive, flammable container of some kind in there. And there's like a fire captain who can command other firefighters to get extra actions. There's a ambulance gurney you have to move around the edges, and like a fire deck gun, I think they call it, so you can spray into certain areas of the house. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. It's really, really tough, because the fire, like I say, it spreads randomly and it will cause smoke, and then if something catches fire next to smoke, it will spread, and if it then hits walls, it destroys the walls, and there's only so much structural integrity to the house. So we played a few times last night and lost every time.
Wow.
But it was really good, and the digital version, which I'd not played before, is really slick looking and is a really good version of that game. Weirdly, it's got a weird overcooked vibe, because it's got very jaunty music, and the fire has this kind of cartoonish look to it.
I find that like very morbid. You comparing it to Overcooked.
Yeah, well, that's the strange thing.
Something certainly is cooking in that game.
Yeah, the game itself is like the people inside the house can succumb to the flames and so on. So there's this kind of jaunty music and like cartoony atmosphere, and it did feel a bit at odds with what you were doing.
Do you think they just used assets or something that they could get a hold of?
I don't know, to be honest. It's not exactly the same, but it definitely has some similarities with that kind of visual presentation and audio. So yeah, if you've got that bundle, it's in there. Try and search it out. I think there is a search function in that bundle.
There is, blessedly.
There were so many games.
I'm really glad that you have to add things to your library for them to show up, because otherwise it would just be untenable.
So yeah, I played that, and then speaking of Victorian things, we played the Dishonored RPG this week, which will be up on the channel at some point, which is kind of set in a pseudo-Victorian world based on the video games, and I enjoyed that very much. We were GM'd by Alex Meehan.
Yes,
the one and only.
Who put together a very fun little adventure in Dunwall with the least street gang, consisting of like a book writer and a slightly posh, like super powered posh person, essentially.
Who was a duelist.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. Yeah. So I do GM. I've GM'd a decent amount, but like not as often as I play. And especially when you're doing a new system, which, this Dishonored system, which is based on the D20 system that Modiphius, the publishers, use a lot. It is quite stressful when you're having to do that, and there's just quite a few factors involved. It's enough that you have to run a story and operate NPCs and keep an eye on like where characters are in a spatial sense, but then you're also like having to remember exactly how the system works, which we had a few hiccups, but I think it's okay, the system. I think it's got its positives and it's got its negatives.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I thought you ran it very smoothly, but I did feel underwhelmed by the system itself. I think what it does very well is it gets you thinking about the manner in which you're doing things, because to get a target number, you've got skills and you've got styles. So it could be move, talk, fight, whatever, and you could be doing that carefully, quietly, forcefully, boldly. So if you move boldly, you add your move number to your boldly number, and you try and roll under that with 2d20s. And that was good fun, but I know that we were, only starting characters, but I was playing like a proper bruiser, and the thing I was very best in the world at, i.e. punching people in the mouth, my target number was 11, which is just a smidge over a 50-50 shot. So, a lot of the time when I succeeded, I felt very lucky, and when I failed, I felt stupid, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm meant to be great at, and I missed.
I think I kind of see what they're going for, because obviously the thing is with the 2D20 system, it's something that they've used for a lot of their RPGs, regardless of the setting or the universe it's based on. So with Dishonored, on the one hand, in the video game, you're playing someone who's like very powerful, like they can teleport, they can like stop time, things like that. Whereas obviously in the RPG, if you had everyone capable of doing things like that, I think it would go off the rails and people wouldn't have a sense of their own, like, oh, this is my character's vulnerabilities, they are a person in this world. And I think it does tackle with that with mixed results. So on the one hand, it does, as a GM, it does kind of outline for you the difficulty ratings are quite broad. That's the thing. It goes from 0, which is just don't bother with a skill test, to 5 successes, which is like nigh on impossible. Even for like, very experienced characters who have much higher skills and styles. And like where you choose to put your skill tests within that range is entirely up to the GM. And because it's so broad, sometimes you don't really... It can be a bit tough to figure out, okay, where do I put this? Because in your mind, you're like, I think this would be quite hard. But translating that into like an actual range of difficulty, you want to make sure that it is possible, particularly with the player characters you've got in your group. But also you don't want to make it a cakewalk. Because you want it to reflect in the challenge difficulty, what it's kind of like within the game. So I think it has strengths in terms of, I think it lowers the complicated aspects that some RPGs have, or your character has this million like proficiencies, this is what they can do. Character sheets in the Dishonored RPG are quite straightforward, but they still give you an opportunity to reflect who your character is. It's not like copy and paste. But I think it's harder I think the GM can have a harder time with that, because they have to kind of express a lot more of their own decision making.
Yeah.
That it's on them, like how difficult something's going to be.
Yeah. I found from the player side, like you're saying, I mean, it's kind of like it's both flexible, but it's also weirdly rigid, because there were times where it's like, okay, there are kind of five skills and 5 styles, which like you say, are pretty broad. It's like carefully, boldly, but then you would just get weird edge cases where it's like, well, I'm doing this and it's not really carefully or cleverly, it's somewhere in between those, and so you start trying to like justify what you're doing into like almost the box of what could be clever versus careful.
Yeah. And
so there are just certain odd edge cases where it's like, well, I'm kind of rolling on this, but it's not exactly what I'm trying to do. And I guess that's like any RPGs, you fudge it a little bit, but it just felt at points like, oh, it's a cool idea for a system and it allows you to do a lot. But like you say, like with the GM, it kind of throws it open to you. It then is just kind of like, yeah, pick the 2 that you think fits best. And at points like, if there was just a tiny bit more structure around some of the key things you were doing, it would be helpful. Because otherwise it's like, well, I don't know, like I'm talking to this person, but I'm just kind of talking to them, like boldly, forcefully, carefully doesn't really apply here. We're just having a normal conversation. So then you start being like, oh, I'm trying to like force a question out of them or force some kind of answer rather than just having a conversation to get simple detail. I don't know.
I think for me the problem was, like, going into this, I was aware that obviously Blaze in the Dark exists, and that is very heavily and very unapologetically influenced by Dishonored as a series. So I was wondering whether Dishonored could do a better job at representing itself than Blaze in the Dark, and I left feeling like no, like in terms of the system, it doesn't. So for me, it would be a no-brainer as to like Blades or Dishonored. Blades.
Yeah, I think I do like the styles aspect, because I think it helps players to do things in a way that they perhaps wouldn't think of. So usually, you are still open to describe like how you want to do it within the game, but then obviously translating that to a skill test, I think you can still customize it with the styles. I think they do help with, saying I'm doing it this way because, my character is quite a brusque, like straightforward person, like, and they are just outright asking this person this question like this, and I can see what it's trying to do, but on the other hand, I think it's definitely not perfect in the sense that, it doesn't quite provide all the tools you might need to run this in a certain way. Like it was still, it still worked.
Yeah.
But there were like a few moments where I was sat there running through my head going, okay, how do I do this? Like, how are they going to do this? And I don't know whether that's just because I'm not used to using a system like that, or whether it's the system itself. But yeah. There you go.
Excellent. Let's move on to news. So at the top of this, because it was meant to be happening this weekend, I would imagine quite a few people have seen now, but Origins Online, which was replacing Origins Game Fair, the large US convention that takes place each summer, that's been cancelled. It was due to take place from the 19th to the 21st of June, so that's this weekend if you're listening to this podcast as it goes live. And it was cancelled essentially in response to the organiser, so GAMA, which is the trade body, the game, let me get this correct, the Game Manufacturers Association, which hosts Origins. They failed to make a statement on Black Lives Matter, and so a number of people of colour and black creators and other members of the industry spoke out against their silence in response to the ongoing protests and the opposition to police brutality and racism and injustice happening. And some of the industry members who were set to take part in panels and talks and host the show pulled out in solidarity, leading GAMA to announced that the show was cancelled. They did then make a statement on Black Lives Matter, although it was decidedly lacking, let's say. They basically acknowledged that they had not said anything quick enough, and said that anyone who requested a refund could instead request that their money go towards, let me find the exact thing, so organisations including Black Lives Matter, the NAACP, the Black Trans Advocacy Coalition, the Columbus Freedom Fund, the Community Justice Exchange, and the Innocence Project. And they said they would match anyone that refunded their ticket price or exhibitor price and asked for it to go towards that. But it didn't commit to a minimum amount. So it just said it would match any people who requested their own money would go towards those instead. So there's obviously a lot involved in this, and we obviously stand with the people who stood in solidarity against this. Obviously, silence is complicity at this point. It's pretty shocking that such a large trade body was unable to make a statement before it's too late. And even when that statement came out, it was, as I say, kind of lacking. So, if you want the full information on that, that's out there. But the short of it is that event will no longer take place. The physical event will then happen this October, and we'll see if any changes are in place by then. And on a similar line, regarding Black Lives Matter, which is obviously the protest still taking place. We hope everyone taking part in this protest is staying safe. We stand in solidarity with you. If you're unable to participate in those protests in person, we hope you're lending your support and helping other voices to be heard. And there have been a number of bundles. We spoke about the Itch bundle already. There have been some on Drive-Thru RPG. There's a lot of initiatives going on to fundraise for Black Lives Matter and other organisations at the moment, which leads us to Dissident Whispers, which is a collection of adventures for various role-playing games, which was announced, or released, today. So as of June 17th, it's available in digital form. Alex, Meehan, you wrote the story. What's inside this collection?
Yes, I did write the story. It's quite an impressive, collection of adventures. So storylines that GMs can use for like a very wide variety of RPGs, mostly focusing on kind of indie games. So there is stuff for 5e. But there's also adventures for a sci-fi horror game called Mothership, which has some really awesome art, and it was published by the same company that's publishing the Dissident Whispers book itself, and also Morkborg, which we've covered previously, which is kind of like a post-apocalyptic hellscape RPG, and like tons of others on top of that. And it's essentially like the Avengers of RPGs, in terms of like it's brought a very wide variety of people together, writers, artists, producers, from all kinds of backgrounds, to create their kind of vision of RPGs, and then collect it all together into one book. And it's on sale right now, the PDF version, as Mr. Jarvis said, and essentially all kind of initial profits generated by it are going to the NAACP, the National Bail Fund Network, which is like an organization kind of focused around stopping people from being incarcerated unfairly, and generally helping people deal with difficult situations surrounding that. And then there is a physical copy coming, which is available to pre-order at the moment, and I think it's coming next month. Essentially, once the initial profits are collected, the rest of the money raised will be kind of spread across various charities and funds in support of Black Lives Matter. So, I think it looks pretty cool, and you get 50 different adventures in one book, and the money goes to a really good cause. So, the art is also awesome. The front cover was done by an artist called I've got it here somewhere, Jabari Weathers, who has done artwork for Harlem Unbound, which I want to play real bad, and it's just awesome. Like, I recommend you go and look at her work as well, because when I was kind of doing my research, I was like, oh yeah, there's some really awesome tableaus there. So yeah, Dissident Whispers.
Excellent. Sticking on an RPG train, this is kind of an interesting one. So it was announced a while back, but they've just given it a release date. Roll20, which is the folks behind the kind of virtual tabletop. I never know really what to call it, because it's kind of like a virtual tabletop, but you end up adding so many words to explain what it is. But it's essentially a website where you can play RPGs and do maps and chat and roll fake dice and virtual dice. They've announced that they are making an RPG, which is called Burn Bryte. Bryte spelled Bryte.
Of course it is, yeah.
Yeah. So it's their first RPG, I believe, that's developed in-house, and it is exclusive to Roll20, as you'd expect from the people that make Roll20. So it's designed specifically, they say, to be played online using their own platform, which is, it's kind of interesting as a concept. The kind of setting of it is sci-fi-ish. It's kind of said to be inspired or influenced by Star Wars and Voltron and things like that. Kind of takes place in a universe where the edges are being burnt away by, I think, something called literally the burn, as is the way in fancy or tabletop RPGs. Why come up with something else when you can just call it the and let it do what it does?
Bernie Sanders is just out there destroying bits of the universe.
Yeah, that's what I was instantly thinking about. Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's out next month, the start of next month, July 7th. And like I say, they say that it's been designed to be played online specifically. So they mention here, you can create customizable characters in a matter of seconds. You can customize the spaceship that you fly around in as a crew. You can roll on random tables really easily because it's all digital. And they just say, they suggest that the gameplay involves rolling, quote, fistfuls of dice, which sounds like one of those things where if it was a physical tabletop game, it would be an absolute nightmare. But because it's all digital, they're just like, yeah, chuck all the dice in because you can just click and it adds up 40 dice at once. So
play to your strengths. Why not?
Yeah. But it's got kind of a cool art style, and it sounds interesting. Sci-fi RPGs of this nature are kind of dime a dozen at some point. But it's cool to see people kind of experimenting, particularly in the current era we're in, where a lot of people are playing online, kind of seeing how far they can push the idea of playing RPGs online and see what they can use technology wise.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a no-brainer really. Like, I found out about this and went, oh yeah, of course they're making an RPG specifically for play during in Roll20. I think more power to them. It's their platform, and yeah, like you say, it's interesting to see what people can do with technology, like a specific technological setup front and center, rather than sort of saying, oh, you can budget to play like this. Like another game actually from the racial equality bundle on itch is this Discord has ghosts in it, which is an RPG for up to 12 people where you set up a Discord, and the Discord gets more and more channels as people are basically exploring a haunted mansion. So all of the channels have room names and stuff like that. And you either play as an investigator or a ghost. And if you're playing as an investigator, you can only use your mic and you have to be set to push to talk, so using it like a walkie-talkie. If you're a ghost, you can only type. And it sounds absolutely bananas, but it's a game that really you can only pull off on Discord. Like, I can't think of any other way that would be as engaging. So
yeah, it's similar to... Oh, sorry, Meehan.
I was say, I think I find that fascinating. Like, I'm always impressed by any piece of art or creative media that uses limitations to its advantage, or like uses its platform, like actually uses it. Especially when it comes to like horror, I love that, and like I think that with that RPG and with the RPG that Will's covered recently.
Yes, Alice is Missing.
Alice is Missing.
Oh man, I can't wait for that.
Which uses purely text channels. And I think that's really... I love the idea of, creatively we're going beyond just the traditional, like, here is your rule system, here is your world, here are your NPCs, which, that format will always work, it will always be there. But, like, actually experimenting beyond that with how you interact with the RPG, I think that this is... I think perhaps we're seeing a new wave of, like, RPGs, like a new creative movement, like a new art movement, but for RPGs.
Yeah, that is a hope of, obviously, beyond the surface level, like, it's obviously for a fantastic cause. That itch bundle, like, I have no idea how many people purchased it in the end, but you just hope that it's opening up, like I say, literally, 1,700 games, many of which are tabletop RPGs, to a whole audience that wouldn't have experienced them otherwise. And a lot of the games on itch are that kind of, they're smaller, they're indie, they are more experimental and inventive. And so you just hope that maybe then plants those seeds for future designers who try something really fascinating that they wouldn't have encountered otherwise, and then that leads to something else in the future. So yeah, on a sci-fi trend, a very quick one, Star Wars. Fortunately, it's not a Monopoly this time or something of that ilk, but it is another Star Wars spin-off. Unlock, the kind of escape room in a box series, which we've discussed a little bit before. I know that Wills is a fan. It's getting a Star Wars box set of 3 kind of scenarios inspired by, they say they are set during the original trilogy, but they're not based on the film specifically, so they kind of take place with the background of like Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and so on.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, Unlock it's not my favourite of the escape room in a box games, but I think going the Star Wars route is really interesting. It is disappointing, I must say, that none of them are a scenario specifically where you try and escape a trash compactor.
That was exactly where my brain went, yeah.
Instead, there's one on Hoth. There's one, I think, where you're on a Star Destroyer, or there's an image of a space battle, so you're kind of in space somewhere. One in a space, and then there's one set on. What's the name of the planet in Rogue One?
Jeddah.
The prequel film, Jeddah. Thank you. So there's one set on Jeddah. So it kind of takes place just before the first Star Wars.
I'm really hoping the Hoth one you've been inserted into a Tauntaun the wrong way.
Yeah!
And you're trying to get out through its guts.
It does show someone riding a Tauntaun, so yeah, the hope is that you're just trying to solve puzzles inside the stomach. It's like, oh, here's a coded liver, or I need to combine the kidney with the lung.
You must deduce clues from the Tauntaun's last meal in order to find out how to escape.
Or you're one of those little ships that are flying around the ATTs.
Oh, so you're a snowspeeder.
Yeah, and you're like, oh god, just shoot the spear. Oh, you missed, and then you get it in, and you have to like try and fly around the legs, but then no, you miss, and you fly into one of the legs and you blow up.
I don't think we're going to be approached to write any Star Wars escape room scenarios anytime soon, are we?
We should be, because to be honest, we would just fill it with gonk droids.
Yeah, we really would.
Escape from the gonk droid.
One gonk droid can only gonk the truth. Sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say, so this it's called, inventively, Unlock Star Wars.
Oh, yeah,
and it is due for release in late August, according to Asmodee France, and then French media website Trick Track has dated it for August the 23rd. It's worth saying here that so far as we've seen, there's only the French version that's been kind of revealed, but I would very much expect it will come out in English, but who knows whether that will be a little bit later in the year. I don't believe they put a price on it either. I think the original Unlock series was about 30 quid or something like that for the 3 scenarios in one box. And you can reuse them, unlike the Exit games. So you could pass on the box to someone else, because it's all done for a companion app. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
How's your French, Matt?
Actually, so my wife speaks very good French, because she used to live in Mauritius.
We'll just play it with her.
Non, je suis ton père.
It just adds another layer of trying to work things out. All right, let's move on. Wow, there's a lot of sci-fi news, I've just realised. It wasn't deliberate, this just happened to be how the week panned out. Pew pew is a noise that you could associate with Warhammer 40,000.
Oh, that's definitely not the noise I associate with that.
No, it's more of a stompy, splattery chainsaw noise.
Yeah.
Space Marine! That kind of a thing.
Yeah,
about that.
So they announced a new 9th edition of Warhammer 40,000 a few weeks or months back. Who knows what time is anymore. But they've now kind of announced the first big release for it, which is called Indomitus, which is a very Warhammer 40,000 name. It's described as a box set. It's not quite a starter set, because it doesn't include any dice and it doesn't include any kind of tape measures or anything like that. So it appears to be kind of aimed towards people that have already played 40k and are kind of looking to step into this new edition. It comes with 61 miniatures. So you've got your Primaris Space Marines. They are Space Marines. They do what you expect of Space Marines. There's a few kind of additions. And then there's loads of Necrons. There's 37 Necron models, so they make up the bulk of it. And they look pretty great. And then alongside those models, it will include kind of the core rulebook, and it will include like a little lore booklet that has some details on the specific units in the set, transfers, that kind of thing. And then I believe that's kind of it. So it's kind of your models, your rules, like a little lore booklet, some reference sheets, that kind of a thing. But like I say, no dice, no measures. So like I say, it appears to be more of a box set for people that are already in the game rather than... They've also said it will be limited edition around launch, so it's not going to be the new box to go out if you're trying to introduce someone to 40k. Yeah. So that is due for release next month. So we've kind of got a date on the new edition.
I think it's smart play. I've said in the podcast before that they're definitely trying to say to 8th Ed players, like, you don't have to buy everything all over again. We're not resetting the clock, yada yada yada. And so, making sure that people can pick up the models without then having a load of bits that they have to flog on to someone else. It's it's the right way to go about it.
I say, every time a new 40k comes around, as a former Warhammer player, every time I look at it, I go, wow, these models are like, they're really nice. They're really nice models. Maybe I should get into it. And then I remember that I have to paint and, well, not glue because they're push fit now, but I have to paint up those 61 miniatures.
Yep.
And that's not something that's going to happen. So then I just end up in the like, oh, right, like, okay. But yeah, it's cool. They've been doing some really interesting stuff with 40k recently. So the new edition, for folks that might have missed the initial announcement, is kind of billed as, it's like a small step up from 8th edition. So it's not a complete overhaul in the same way that 8th edition was. It's kind of more just tweaking and putting more of a focus on the narrative side. So there are new game modes that focus on kind of story-driven battles and kind of diving into the lore, which is cool. And it makes sense because they're really going heavy on the lore in various TV shows and whatnot.
Yeah, if we're not going to get any takers for our ideas for Star Wars on lock, maybe we can start pitching some storylines for Warhammer adventures.
Sure.
Like the mystery of the missing lemon cake.
They did do... there was a series of kids' books not that long ago, which was a curious thing in itself, because you don't necessarily look at Warhammer 40k and go, oh yeah, that's suitable for like under 10s, space Nazis and death. But yeah, they did do... They've been pretty smart with what they have. I think they obviously know that it is a huge thing that people, whether for nostalgic reasons or just whatever, people are drawn to. So
yeah, well, watch out, Warhammer. I'm sending emails.
Oh, goodness. Last on the news list, moving on, is Magic the Gathering, which has banned some racist and culturally offensive cards. Some of these are quite shocking, actually. So many of them date back to the 90s. There are 7 cards named specifically. So Invoke Prejudice, Cleanse, Stone-Throwing Devils, Pradesh Gypsies, Jihad, Imprison, and Crusade. So they've been banned from all tournament play, and they've also been replaced in the Gatherer, which is the online database of Magic the Gathering cards. They've been replaced by text that says, we've removed this card image from our database due to its racist depiction, text, or combination thereof. Racism in any form is unacceptable and has no place in our games nor anywhere else.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair to them, is a good start. There's a lot of work to be done in Magic and in Wizards regarding a lot of this stuff, but I think the fact they were quite upfront about these cards, it's kind of shocking that it's taken this long, because some of them came out in 1994.
Yeah.
So they call out Invoke Prejudice, which was released in 94. So the year after Magic originally came out, which has kind of hooded figures and its ability. So if opponent casts a summon spell that does not match the colour of one of the creatures under your control, the spell is countered where the caster pays an additional X, where X is the casting cost of the summon spell. So essentially it stops the other player playing any other colour to some degree.
And the last 4 digits of the multiverse ID were 1488. Which is hideous.
Oh no!
Yeah, which So the multiverse code is kind of like the chronological order of when cards came out. So they just assign it at random. So it appears, and there's no reason to not believe them on this point, that it was just a very unfortunate coincidence. For folks not aware, 1488 is used as a kind of a right wing and alt-right reference to some really severely racist, nasty things with links to Nazism and yeah, just deep unpleasantness. And I believe
the 14 words, which is a statement about securing a future for white children specifically, and then 8 is the 8th letter of the alphabet, so HH Heil Hitler, which is pretty grim.
So yeah, they've already updated its multiverse code, so that is now gone. And like I say, they've replaced the images with text stating as much, and all the cards are banned. And they've said, Wizards of the Coast have said that they're going to go through all the cards released for Magic the Gathering, which at this point is over 20,000, and review them all. Which, again, there's a lot of work to be done in the industry in general, and certainly, Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, things with histories going back many years, and even more recent things. There's a lot to be done, but it's nice to see a step in the right direction. So hopefully,
at least they're doing it. But like you would hope that it would have been something they'd started doing, quite a while ago, where they're like aware of the fact that this stuff. I mean, still though, the 90s, like it's not like, I mean, the 90s were like over. Like 1994 was like over 20 years ago, but that's still not that long ago. And you'd think, firstly, this stuff shouldn't be put out on Magic cards anyway. But like, secondly, you'd hope that they would make the effort to review it like fairly frequently, not like, oh, suddenly, hang on, maybe we should check this.
So they're
going forward. Hopefully they'll have a better policy.
Yeah, so their announcement statement said, it should have never been published nor placed in the Gatherer, and for that we are sorry. The events of the past weeks and the ongoing conversation about how we can better support people of colour have caused us to examine ourselves, our actions and our inactions. We appreciate everyone helping us to recognise when we fall short. We should have been better, we can be better, and we will be better. So again, they appear to be taking some
responsibility.
Yeah. So a lot of work to be done, but hopefully a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And with that, shall we move on to questions from the audience? So if you would like to send a question into the Dicebreaker podcast, you can email podcast@dicebreaker.com. You can find us on Twitter @joindicebreaker, where you can just tweet us with your hot takes or something you'd like to know. Or you can just generally find us around the internet. You know where to find us. If you're listening to this, you've found us somewhere. Let us know. We'll find you, and we might answer your question. So, Alex, actually, Johnny, would you like to read this one from Revolver Rock?
Yes. Dear Dicebreaker team, I know Johnny will play fast and loose with the rules when it comes to TTRPGs for the sake of fun or time restraints. What is everyone's opinion on the rule of fun? How far will you go with it? Would you turn a blind eye so that your players can avoid a party wipe, or do you see that as a central and important part of the experience? When I first read this, I was like, I play by the... I do throw them out the window every now and then.
Come on, let's not kid ourselves.
It is mostly for time restraints. Like, me and you're playing in a campaign that I'm running just for funsies. Like, I feel like I stick to the rules for that.
No, like, obviously, and we've talked about this, peek behind the curtain, viewers and listeners, when you're recording an RPG for a series, sometimes time can be an issue, and you don't realise how long things are running until you actually get in there and the players start interacting with the world. And inevitably you're gonna have to think on the fly and alter things as you go. But when you're just playing with a group of friends, you can be a bit more lenient. But then again, like, people get bored. Like, you can play a great RPG campaign for ages, and no matter how good it is, if you're playing it for like a significantly long time, people are gonna get tired of it. Like,
Yeah.
I've been there where I've been, we've had entire weekends where we've been playing, a campaign that's designed to, be played over that weekend. And when it is going on for as long as it is and people are just like desperate to stop for the day, it can be really great stuff, but
yeah. I think when it comes to like the rule of fun and bending the rules, like, people will say like, oh, can I use this magic spell to do this? I'm like, well, that's not really the letter of the law. But if saying no feels kind of mealy-mouthed, or like it's preventing something that would be good character work or good progression, I'm happy to sort of bend the rules a little bit, or strike a bargain with them. Be like, okay, devil's bargain. Yes, you can do this, but you'll take some damage, or you'll take a level of fatigue or something.
Yeah. Like we've done stuff like that before. Like you can like RPGs aren't the GM versus the player.
Exactly.
It's a collaborative experience, and like as a player before, I've said to the GM, can this happen instead? Like I instead of like a complete failure, or when it feels like something should go wrong, I genuinely veer towards, I want to take a negative effect just because I feel like it would be more interesting.
Talking about turning a blind eye so players can avoid a party wipe, I don't believe in total party wipes. Like I don't see what purpose they serve, because it does just feel adversarial. If someone's like, yeah man, we were fighting this thing and it killed our entire party, that to me just says like the GM didn't offer them, probably didn't offer them a solution to get out of there, or sure, the players might be like, we are all going to go down in a blaze of glory, but if it's like the whole party's dead, what's the point? It's like that you're just starting again. Whereas even if just one person made it out, and maybe they were grievously injured or whatever, but then they met new characters and went on, but they always had the ghost of this past behind them, that's infinitely more narratively interesting than you got into a situation you couldn't handle, now you're all dead, whoops, same time next week, let's make new characters.
I understand why it's there, but like the whole, let's say, like meme aspect of RPGs where it's like the DM is gonna kill you, but when you have the mugs where it's like the DM is evil, or like determining how it's going, how they're going to kill you. I really don't like that, because I'm like, I think one, it encourages like, again, like a competitive aspect between the DM and the players, and that's just not how it should work. And like two, like you're supposed to like the DM, you're supposed to be mates with them, you're not supposed to be like, even if it's ironic, like
they're meant to be the director, right? If you put it in film terms, they're meant to be the director, and the party to some degree are meant to be the stars, in that they exist for not for you to look always good, because that is boring in itself.
That is boring,
for you to have a great experience. So I'm with you, and I think anything that, if it's necessary to strip out for just to keep the momentum going, or to, again, there's a reason why DMs most of the time the rulebook advises rolling behind a screen. Yeah, because that's a lot. You're not there to stick to the letter of the law. You're not playing a game to do accurate maths. You're there to tell a fun story and to have fun. So why, I think you would only be hindering yourself if you've stuck to the letter of the rule book and we're just like, nobody's enjoying this because it's taking too long, or it's killed everyone, or it's just rubbish.
Yeah, I do.
Who's that benefiting?
I do think that the rules are there, like good rules, a good rule system. They're there to still provide structure and a challenge. So like, I don't believe that players, and like I can sometimes struggle with this because I can feel guilty when I'm making it difficult for my players, because like I want them to enjoy themselves, I want them to succeed, but at the same time just giving it to them isn't satisfying for anyone. So like, even when you're like sitting there and your players are a bit frustrated, or they're like, I didn't get what I wanted, and we work with someone who can sometimes be a little bit like that. Just saying. Just saying.
Aw.
No, we love you, Wills. I love you, Wills.
You're fine.
Like, it's still worth standing your ground because, yeah, like, it's not about handing it to them on a plate, but it's also not about, like, you know, being a nasty person. Johnny's still grinning.
So I just had a powerful flashback to, I think, the moment that predicated that comment. It's quite funny. No, I do love Wheels, obviously.
No, like you've got to have different player types, like, yeah, and it makes it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He certainly does. Meehan, would you like to read this one on a similar vein, actually, from Emily Scheel?
Okay, Emily Scheel asks, "Hi, I'd love to get some insights on getting into D&D when you don't have a group of friends that are into it. I find starting a campaign and learning all the rules over super overwhelming, so some beginner tips would be very useful."
This sounds like I'm being a contrarian for the sake of it, but yeah, don't play D&D.
Yeah, I know. We're just gonna say that.
Like, probably is. It is overwhelming, and it is a lot to absorb, and it is a lot to get across to other people, especially if they're not yet, not already into it. You're also having to sell it to them, and that's a lot. So start somewhere else. Get them on the hook with a different game, something easier, like Quest. We bang on about it all the time. It's an incredibly simple game to pick up. It's set in a very sort of similar feeling world, so it will be easy to convert them to D&D if that's where you want to end up. But it's just great, and it's a book geared towards people who are starting out in RPGs. It's a really gentle guide, and I just think, yeah, if you want to learn to play D&D, learn to play a different game. It sounds so like, but yeah.
The thing is, I do understand why people want to learn D&D and like why they suggest it, because people are aware of D&D, and like if you're selling, can we play an RPG to a group of people who've never done it before, D&D is a recognizable, example of that, and in fact some people might not know that there's anything else but D&D. That's the problem. So I do understand why people do jump to D&D, because it is hugely popular, it's everywhere. But yeah, I think if you're struggling with the rules, and I can find it overwhelming too. Like, D&D, again, you can strip it down, but like there's still a lot of there to juggle, especially if you're GMing. And it's like, regardless of whether you use like a set campaign or not, sometimes the set campaigns can be harder to deal with. So like, maybe even try some solo RPGs to start with. Like, get your head around those, get more confident with doing that kind of on the fly, creating stories on the fly, and then dip your toe into the myriad of other RPGs that are out there that have much more straightforward rule sets, like, Lasers and Feelings.
Yeah.
Or any of those, some of those RPGs. I would say even Blaze in the Dark is more straightforward than D&D. Like, and they're all in that bundle, so if you got the bundle...
I think there's an element as well of like you're both kind of saying, what is the reason you're playing D&D? If it's because you know of it, obviously, it's the easiest thing to jump to, because sometimes it's hard to go out and search for something that is an alternative. But I think, there are so many resources, Dicebreaker included, but there are loads of great resources out there. Even asking on Twitter, there'll be plenty of people that will come back to you with suggestions of RPGs that either dive into specific things that are similar to D&D, but I think, why aren't your friends gelling with it? Is it because that they don't like the theme, or is it because of the rules? Because there is the potential then to, as Meehan and Johnny were saying, kind of pick up a different RPG. And even if you play something like Quest or another fancy RPG, if you decide that then you really like the look of a particular D&D book, a lot of that stuff is applicable across. Like, stat blocks will be different, but you can take the kind of basic story points and adapt them, particularly in a much kind of more simple RPG where you don't have to worry about 20 different stats for a monster and 40 different keywords that you're looking up in the back. You can just kind of take an idea and run with it. So I think, yeah, it's worth doing, like Meehan says, and Johnny, looking at simpler RPGs, looking at doing one-shots rather than jumping straight into a campaign. We've kind of said this before. Like, the temptation is to be like, let's do a campaign, like, let's get going.
Yeah.
You know, take it step by step. Like, if you really want to play D&D, you know, start with just the basics. Just strip out half of the rules because half of them are really boring and unnecessary anyway.
Encumbrance.
You know, just get... Yeah.
Spell casting requirements.
All of that stuff. It's like, it's no... Like we were just saying, it's no fun. So find the stuff that you're going to find fun, because no one's going to come after you. You know, you're playing for the benefit of your group. So if you find the things that you're going to enjoy, whether it's in D&D or a different game, like, that ultimately is what's important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come out and say it, right? I think D&D is at war with itself, right? Because on the one hand, it's got to please an audience of people who have been playing it for a while, and they're used to having things like, you know, spellcasting requirements, spell slots, you know, like, movement, you know, or speed stats, things like that. But it's also obviously wants a larger group of people playing, who aren't familiar with it, and they're introducing new ideas that are kind of trying to make it more attractive to those people. So like the Critical Role rulebook, like, a lot of people watch Critical Role but they don't play Dungeons and Dragons, and they're like, oh, this could be my entry point. And then I'm like, you know, that's great, but it's still clinging on to some of the old stuff because they're afraid of changing it to the point where their audience are going to start accusing them of, like, you know, what's the word, like, watering down the rule set and the experience. And I'm just like, you're going to have to decide someday, my friends, because you can't just keep walking the tightrope.
Yep, I'm right there with you.
There you go.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a lot of legacy stuff to take on, and I think that's something people don't realise when they're like, it's time for me to get into D&D.
Like we were saying with indie games, I think that's the thing that really stands out about more recent games, is just how nimble they are. Just like there's, with 5 pages of rules, or even 2 pages, or a single page, you can get just as much of an experience because it really puts the focus on the storytelling rather than the number crunching. Because D&D kind of grew out of, like, the wargaming scene, and it's never really escaped that. Like, it's always been crunchy. Like, the idea of playing, I used to play Pathfinder, and now looking back and thinking that was kind of my entry point, where we were trying to play with gridded maps and the combat was move this number of squares and this is your... Looking back, I'm amazed that I stuck with RPGs as long as we did. And I think it's just because we had a fantastic GM who would strip out the bits that we found uninteresting or boring or too much. But yeah, just like they feel very dated now when there are so many amazing things out there. They're cheap, they're made by really inventive and, you know, talented designers. Like, there's more than enough out there. Quest is a great example, you know. I will read this one from Amethyst Bookworm. On Twitter. Thank you for your question. What's the one game you feel needs more attention, and the one game which is overrated? So I guess this could be board game or tabletop RPG.
Flux is overrated. Flux is nonsense. Flux is rubbish. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, Flux sucks.
Flux sucks.
Sucks with 2 X's.
What needs more attention?
For that, I would jump in and say there's a really nifty little game called Shobu, which came out last year, which is an abstract game. So it's literally played on 4 wooden boards, which are gridded. I think they're 8x8, something like that. There's a bit of rope in between them. So the box is literally 4 wooden boards that are a bit like wooden chopping boards, a bit of rope, and then black and white stones, just pebbles. But it's really just it's really brilliant. So it's a bit like chess in that it's just black versus white. You're moving to knock pieces off, but there's a brilliant twist in that your first move, you can't collide with any other pieces on the board, and then that move is mirrored exactly on the board opposite to it. So if you move your piece on the board one side of the rope, you then have to move this like a matching piece the other side of the rope, and that piece can collide with opponent's stones and force them off the board, and you win by forcing all the stones off of a single board. Like, I'm making it sound much more complicated than it is, but it's just one of those really clever ideas that feels instantly kind of timeless because it's so simple. It uses these kind of natural components. You know, you could probably put it together at home with a couple of bits of paper, or you could draw it in sand and play with some pebbles at the beach. I would obviously recommend paying for it and supporting the people that created it. But that's what I mean. It's like it just feels so brilliantly smart with no rules overhead. You know, you can learn it straight away. So yeah, I really, really love Shobu. It feels in the same vein as something like Hive, where it's just like this should be around for like decades, centuries, you know.
Obviously I think Crokinole should be in every pub in the world. And bar billiards. You look at other games, you're like, why are you the standard? Why have you got a pool table? Get rid of it.
Crokinole. Yeah.
Crokinole.
I'd say this might be hot takes. I'm gonna say I think one of the big overrated games for me is King of Tokyo. I understand why people like it so much because it is a good entry point game. Again, for people who don't play board games that much, and maybe it's just because I know so many people who own it and play it that I've gotten like exhausted by it. But I just think it's just very like limited in what you can get out of it. Because I really like push your luck games. Like, I think they're really awesome. Like, it's why I think like Clank is so good, because it pushes the push your luck mechanic in multiple different levels. Like, there's various ways you can interact with that mechanic. But like King of Tokyo, which is, you know, less complicated than Clank, but like it's very much like each turn is very similar to the next, regardless of your situation, and there's just not a heck of a lot you can do in the game. I think it's very much one you stick down and then people don't really pay attention to it and they just sort of talk over it, which is fine, but like I'm kind of a bit done with it now. Maybe I've become one of those insufferable people that are like, oh, you'll play King of Tokyo. And I think a game that is underrated is Team 3. Have you guys played Team 3?
No.
Matt's nodding, he's nodding. Pink or green, I don't think it really matters that much. It's a party game, which instantly you're like, oh, okay. But like, it's a game where you have to work as a team of people, and one person, I think one person can't. Is it one? Help me out.
It's the monkeys, right? One person can't see.
Oh, yes, I've seen this.
And then one person can't speak. I think it's literally the three
See no
monkeys.
evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
Yeah. And like one person has a card which has a pattern on it, and there are like a series of different shaped blocks, and the person with the card has to basically, like, they can't speak, so they have to sort of mime out the shape of the block, and the next person has to, like, can't see the card, they have to describe what the other person is miming to the other person who has to put the structure together without looking, so they're blind essentially. They have to keep their eyes closed, and it's just such a fantastic premise with very little actually physically involved. Like, there's just a set of cards and a set of blocks.
Hmm.
But like I really like it when party games particularly get really imaginative, particularly with like space and how people use it and how they interact with each other within that space. And I think Team 3, like, we played it in a board game cafe last year, and it was just hilarious. Like, we were laughing our heads off just playing it. I just think it's, again, like, I don't think a board game has to have a billion elements or mechanics to be good.
Mm-hmm.
I just think they have to be clever with the potential for those mechanics.
Yeah. I think taking away things as well often leads to more interesting games. Taking like limited communication or limited whatever it may be. Like
Happy
spatial...
Salmon where you can't talk is infinitely better than Happy Salmon where you can.
Yeah. Apart from the mind, which,
We're getting a reputation of hate the mind.
I don't hate it. Like, it's a fascinating thing, but yeah, like, as particularly having played The Crew now, it's like, oh, this is like a real kind of interesting way that feels like substantial. I don't think I said something that I felt was overrated, but I thought of it while you were chatting away, Meehan. I'm going to throw this out there because Lolies isn't here. Quacks of Quedlingberg is just fine. It's just okay.
Oh, you're stabbing her in the heart!
It's also, I think it's also Wolfgang Warsch who is the designer of the mind, so I'm sorry, Wolfgang. It's nothing personal. Like, I don't think it's a bad game by anything. It's just, it didn't set the world on fire for me. I was just like, yeah, this is fine.
Is it because Lolies talks about it a lot?
No, I was indifferent to it before I met Lolies. So yeah, it's like it's a fun enough game, but I would never pull it out and like play it with someone over something else. It's just like, I'll sit through this.
Apologies for my cat going.
Apologies for my cat who just ambushed me from the side.
I don't have a cat to do that with.
Should we do one more?
Yeah, let's do one quick one. Johnny, if you'd like to take this one from Saul Reed.
Saul Reed says, well, seeing that I'm probably going to be listening while baking for my village, and food is currently on my mind, what is the best snacking food for long session board games? I feel like obviously nothing too greasy so you don't mess up the bits. So
for like breadsticks, maybe breadsticks and dip.
Yeah,
like,
I was
breadsticks is a good alternative to
breadsticks.
Crisps because crisps often have like residue, the Doritos dust effect.
You can always count
crisp residue.
You can always count on one of my friends to go to a Turkish supermarket and get like really big flat breads and tzatziki and taramasalata and hummus. So like you get all of like the goo and the delicious taste of things, but your hands are kind of fine.
Yeah, but it's confined to the bread.
Yeah, but also if you can get them, olives stuffed with anchovies are incredible.
But I feel like you need a little cocktail stick or a fork or something.
You do a bit, yeah.
Because otherwise the oil will go everywhere. I really like pretzels, and the problem with pretzels is that obviously they've got some of the salt on there, but they're not greasy like crisps, and I really, if you give me a bowl of pretzels, I will munch through those quite happily.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what I'm putting forward. Pretzels. Eat more pretzels.
Eat more pretzels. The Dicebreaker recommends pretzels.
Eat more pretzels.
And I think with that's all we have time for this week. So
time flies when you're having fun, Matt Jarvis.
It does indeed. Time flies, although this podcast is always roughly the same length, and it always feels about as long. But before we leave you, Johnny, what's coming up on the video side?
The return of Dungeon Breaker.
Yes.
Dungeon Breaker is back. We've finished our little run of Deadlands, the Weird West. So, we're straight back in. We've had a little lineup change, which I think people will enjoy.
Yes.
And then coming up next week, what have we got? More painting, more podcast, more Dungeon Breaker, bit more of everything really. So yeah, we're ticking on, is how I'd say. But headline Dungeon Breaker, I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, there was amazing fun. It was good to be back. And yeah, the new party member, I think, just
Oh, yeah.
Mwah.
perfect.
When can the people expect Dishonored, my good friend?
Good question. Next week, probably.
Next week, probably.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming at some point.
We've not finally nailed that down yet, but soon.
Woo!
Meanwhile, over on the website, we have obviously the usual kind of recommendations coming up for various, well, whatever you're looking for, really, whether you're looking to get folks into board games for the first time, or we have, Alex, Meehan, you've spoken with the folks at D&D about Feros, or Odysseys of Feros, is it called?
Let me correct you on that. Mythic Odysseys of Feros.
Thank you.
I felt so smug doing that.
You sounded it.
I think you'll find.
That's one of my favourite voices to do. I spoke to the co-lead designers on the new source book that is currently out, called Mythic Odysseys of Feros. It's based on the Magic the Gathering expansion, and it's kind of focused on Greek myths and Greek gods. And we had a very interesting conversation about kind of how the source book came about, the ideas behind it, and what people can expect from using it in their campaigns. So hopefully that piece should be out next week.
Yeah, again, coming soon.
Coming
who knows what
soon.
time is at the moment? And on the subject of Magic the Gathering and previews, we'll also have a preview of the new Magic the Gathering Core Set 2021, which is more exciting than its very generic name sounds. So we'll have a look at that and what's new in that as the kind of big Magic release of the year. And then we'll have the various daily news and looks at games and whatever you're looking for, we'll have it. So head on over to dicebreaker.com or youtube.com/dicebreaker and we'll be about. You'll see us playing games and commenting on them.
Mr. Jarvis, I believe we have some objects that people can wear. And
we
acquire.
do.
Where would they go to find those?
You mean the Dicebreaker merchandise store at dicebreaker.myshopify.com, which now ships to both the UK and the US for our American fans. We have, I believe, 4 t-shirt designs at the moment. We have some more incoming very soon, which is exciting stuff. There's some real good stuff in the way, but real good stuff already up there. You've probably seen the team wearing the Big Deck Energy and Be Nice Roll Dice shirts. Wood for Sheep, my cat's clawing my arm, which really hurts. And also...
Is that one of the shirts?
And also Luck the Lady. No, that's not a shirt. That's just me bleeding from the elbow because she's decided she no longer wishes to sleep on my cleric robe. Yes, head over to dicebreaker.myshopify.com to rock some of the Dicebreaker merch. But with that,
expect
we will
pigeon
leave you.
mail.
Expect what, sorry?
Pigeon mail.
Pigeon mail?
Yeah, be delivered by pigeons.
Oh, right, yeah, just a pigeon carrying a shirt. Anyway, should we wrap this podcast up?
Yes.
Who knows why it overruns every time?
Can't possibly say.
Thank you very much for joining me, Johnny Chiodini.
My very great pleasure, as always.
Thank you for joining us, Alex Meehan.
Pigeon mail.
I've been Matt Jarvis, and thank you for listening to us, whatever we go on about, for the last hour and a half. And we will be back here, this place on the internet, or in your ears, or in your eyes, next Friday for next week's Dicebreaker podcast. Until then, have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye.